All right, we are finally on a new section.
The sentence ended. Hurrah. Right in time to dump us into this. Article 1, Section 9. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person.
Oh, slavery.
Yes. Such persons. Um, the word that makes me angriest in this whole section is migration, because it implies these people are choosing to come. Yes, I think I will sell myself and all of my descendants into slavery. That sounds like a good day. No, migration is not what is happening here.
So, but for like I think it's 20 years. That
roughly, yeah.
Be like, you can import as much as you want for 20 years, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. And that tax or duty was never imposed. Congress could, Congress didn't.
Too bad, because that was like not too bad, but they probably would have made a lot of money of that.
If it was going to happen, yeah. So,
not to, it's the same thing at all, but like when they started taxing marijuana instead of making it illegal.
Yeah, no, and the thing is obviously there's a very large difference between marijuana and slavery. And there is the principle of if you're going to have it, you should be taxing it. But they didn't, because, frankly, I don't think they had the votes. And so many of the early presidents were from Virginia that they wouldn't have been able to get a tax passed. It would have been vetoed right away. So that's why they didn't. But they should have.
They could have. They should have. They wouldn't.
Shoulda, but didn't. So I said somewhere in the middle of the last sentence that we would get back to the Amistad case. And this is where the Amistad case enters U.S. history, because this abolished the intercontinental slave trade. The transcontinental slave trade is abolished with this amendment, this article, because they could have extended it, but by 1808 there was enough outcry that they were not going to extend the slave trade. It ended in 1808 from Africa. However,
the internal one, however,
the internal one kept going. But also, just because the United States wasn't importing slaves didn't mean slaves were not being imported to the New World, especially Brazil. Slavery was bad in the United States. Slavery was very, very bad. Like, I don't think, sadly, it kind of is. It should not be a controversial statement to say that slavery was bad in the United States. But slavery was horrific in Brazil. The death toll of slaves in Brazil is shockingly high.
Yeah, we talked about this before, but like the United States had very low import rates because they had very low death rates.
Yeah. The sugar plantations of the Caribbean and Brazil just kind of in general had much, much higher death rates and therefore much, much higher importation rates to keep the slave population static. The U.S. was able to increase their slave population enormously without importing new ones. However, that does not mean there was not smuggling going on after 1808.
because unfortunately, not unfortunately, like I said, unfortunately, whatever, both, I guess, mostly unfortunately, they lived long enough to have kids up here.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids and grandkids, and yeah, generational slavery. But there was still smuggling of slaves from Africa even after 1808. And there was a ship called the Amistad, which means friendship, which was a slave ship. And there was a rebellion on the Amistad. And they kept some of the crew alive because they didn't know how to sail the ship. And instead of sailing the ship back to Africa like they said they were doing, I think they were aiming for Cuba and ended up in the United States. And the slaves, the prisoners, because that's what they were prisoners, sued for their freedom. A British ship claimed right of salvage. The Spanish claimed ownership. The surviving crew members claimed ownership. And the prisoners said, "Excuse all of you, we are human beings. You can't own us in the United States because we were illegally transported here." And they got as their lawyer former President John Quincy Adams, at the time a member of the House of Representatives. The only former president to serve in the House of Representatives. And he won. Took the case to the Supreme Court, and he won. The prisoners were returned to Africa. We don't know what happened to pretty much any of them. It's possible some of them were recaptured. We don't know. But there's a really good Steven Spielberg movie about it. Heck of a cast. Djimon Hounsou, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Sir Anthony Hopkins, the guy who played Ed on Northern Exposure. Great cast. It's Darren E. Burroughs, but he's the guy who played Ed on Northern Exposure. And that whole event is based on the idea that we were prohibiting the slave trade.
Him and Taft are the ones that got jobs afterwards.
Yes. Taft went on to the Supreme Court, which is what he had always wanted. And lost a ton of weight, actually, because it was less stressful than being a president. And John Quincy Adams served in the House of Representatives and died on the floor of Congress. Well, not quite, but had his stroke on the floor of Congress.
I can make a stressful. Make a joke here. I think was it the? It might be more, but the last two presidents didn't go gray because they were already gray or had a wig.
Yeah. I mean, one of them was orange, but Biden didn't go gray because he started there.
But yeah,
some of our presidents did start gray, but being president, you look at, I mean, Lincoln had it the worst. Lincoln had it the worst.
Yeah, I've seen before that both Bush Jr. and Obama before and after the 8 years.
Bush the younger, Obama. I mean, not Reagan, because nothing really touched Reagan, and he had a lot of plastic surgery. And
Clinton, maybe.
Clinton definitely aged. Bush the elder started old. But, LBJ had a heart attack not long after leaving the White House. Carter, you can see the change in the 4 years. Since the age of photography, you can see the weight of presidency on people. John Quincy Adams, actually, I believe, is the earliest president we have a photograph of. Partially because he lived so damn long. The Adamses were a long-lived people, clearly.